Afternoon, Tim. How you doing?
Afternoon, Shaba. Yeah, I'm good. How are you? I was just making a note there, actually, that I want to talk about later today. You
Okay.
caught me.
All right. Well, let's dive straight in. This
Mhm.
week, I just had a conversation with a client, and something quite important came up for the individual that was speaking to me, and it was just around the fact that they've suddenly had a huge increase in earnings in the last year, and how it has had a real impact on their life from a position of they are able to spend more and buy nicer things,
Mhm.
but also the relationship with family and the expectation
Yeah.
that now comes from the people around them that, oh, suddenly, so and so's got more money. And the person was like, I wish I just hadn't let them know that I had this
Interesting.
fantastic increase in income,
Mm.
because it's kind of changed things. And
Mm.
I know we've sort of touched upon this in different episodes in the past, but I don't think we've ever dedicated like
No, I
one
don't think so.
episode to this particular issue. And I think this will be quite common for a lot of people who have experienced going up rungs on the ladder and suddenly getting bigger bonuses, bigger paychecks. And so, yeah, how do we dive into
Well,
this?
yeah, well, we will dive in. I think in terms of takeaways, someone listening to this, I think you can get takeaways here from both sides. So as you're right. Sometimes suddenly we find, or gradually we find, we've got a lot more money than friends, family, people around us, or kind of what we were used to growing up. And that can raise many issues. So if that's you and you're listening, I think you'll get a lot here about how to process what comes up for you, and particularly around feelings of connection, belonging, loyalty, relatedness, pressure. There's a lot that can come up, and I think we'll get into some examples. But also the flip side, maybe we'll get into it today, maybe it becomes a two-parter. But sometimes we're not the one with more money, but we either meet someone that we know or already in a friendship relationship with, and they have more money. And then we notice we feel a bit weird around them. Or it might not even be someone we already know. I work with one client who was actually a successful business person himself, and by many standards had more money than certainly than average. But he noticed whenever he met someone who was, quote, more successful than him financially, he would get tongue tied and lose power. So I think in general, the takeaway is notice how when we assess we've got more or less money than other people, how that can get in the way of relationships. Of course, it's never the money that gets in the way of the relationships. It's us and our confused thinking. So yeah. Do you want to say a bit about this person, or should I give some examples where I've met this?
Yeah, I mean, I think just to paint a bit more of a picture and some of the
Mm.
things that were coming up, just so that listeners can maybe resonate with some of the themes. There was stuff around the expectation now that
Mm.
this person takes the family away on holiday. And whilst that seemed on the surface a really enjoyable thing for them to do,
Yeah.
there was also a little bit of now
Yeah.
sort of not resentment. I don't think
Yeah.
that might be too strong a word, but it's just that feeling of now everyone's waiting for this person to offer
Yeah.
to pay for the holiday because suddenly they've got more money.
Mm.
And so there was a feeling of now partners that they've had taking advantage.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so this person was feeling like they haven't set any boundaries since
Mm-hmm.
this jump in salaries happened. And it's left them feeling, I think, a little bit vulnerable,
Mm-hmm.
and also a bit unsure about where they stand in relationships and
Mm-hmm.
new partners, and how do you say no? And I need
Mm-hmm.
to start being able to be comfortable with saying no to family, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And also the last thing was like, I've just had another bumper pay rise and now I'm not telling anyone because it's gone up again. So this was really interesting. But I also like how you were talking about the flip side. How do we relate to people
Well, it
that
is double
it's
sided.
double sided? So it'll be interesting to try and figure out what's going on both
Yeah.
sides of the coin. And so, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So let's just kind of slow it down and strip it down a bit. I think this will be useful both to regular listeners and newer listeners, because there's a complexity here, right? Most of this podcast, we talk about me and my money. Am I spending? Am I holding the money? Do I worry about my money? Do I worry about the future? And that gets complicated enough because one of the tenets of this approach is all of us project, or let's say entangle, aspects of our own psychology with money numbers. So this is a basic idea. Again, regular listeners will know. So if I don't feel powerful, I can kind of unconsciously think, oh, with money, I'll get to feel powerful. I'll get to feel powerful and I can chase money. And then also I might kind of feel funny when I meet people who have lots of money. I might sort of unconsciously imagine they're powerful, and then I don't feel so powerful. But most of what we've explored is, in a way, how all of these different energies and parts are in me, and the parts that I don't see consciously get tied up with money. And that's complicated enough. Now we're really entering into the world of how does that happen when there's a relationship? So let's say I'm the one with more money and people in my family have less money. It's quite likely I will project onto them or that situation, and they'll project something different onto me. So we're in the field of relationship. And that's quite tricky. We've touched on it a little bit when we've talked about marriage and love, and a little bit with parents and children. But it can feel a bit weird. In simple terms, if we're not being psychological, just two people who never used to be weird together suddenly start to feel weird together.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean? It's like, oh, it's all a bit funny. And you hear this all the time with lottery winners.
Yeah.
You hear the number of lottery winners who kind of go, I wish I'd never won the bloody lottery, because if I get a boyfriend or a girlfriend, I don't know if they're into me or my money. I don't know if people are nice to me because they just want my money. Suddenly, something that was relatively simple or straightforward, suddenly everything gets weird.
Just going back, just because
Yeah.
for new listeners, when you said that, for the people that have come into money, or the people that are now looking at people that have got money, there will be a projection. Can you just expand and just clarify that? So for anyone that's new that might not have come
Yeah.
across that,
I'll kind of repeat the general idea, and then I think we'll
give an
dive into
example.
what specifically might be going on here. So the general idea is anytime I relate to money, whether that's having money or having less money or having more money or running out of money, etc. Anytime I notice that gives me a big charge, like I feel emotional or stirred up, it's very likely that I'm tying something up with a number that's about my own psychology. So I gave the example of power earlier. If I act as if I believe that with money comes power, because it's not true, what I'm saying is I don't feel powerful in myself. And so I tangle it up with money. And then I might imagine people with money are powerful. So that's a projection. So in this case, let's look at some of what's going on here. It's really interesting. There's an expectation with the person you were speaking to. Suddenly the family, you said, sort of waiting for them to offer to pay. Now, that may not be a projection. That might be an assumption. They have money. Dear sister or auntie or whoever has money. We don't have so much money. You're going to sit around and hope or expect or assume they will pay. That may not be a projection. That might just be quite fancying a free holiday. The projection comes with the emotion on both sides. So we can imagine the emotion from the other side, but let's talk about the person with money. It sounds like they're feeling a bit pressured, or there's an expectation that I should do this, but it doesn't really feel good, or I don't really feel I want to do this, or something about it doesn't feel great. Do you want to just say a bit more about their experience? And it's through that, anytime that we're feeling a bit emotionally, ooh, like that, that's where we can start to uncover what the projection might be.
I mean, I think in this particular situation, there was a couple of things going on. It was the feeling that there was an expectation that they'll pay for a holiday, or there'll be a treat or something coming from their side.
So
Um,
if I just pause, if I was investigating with the person, I would say, what's the problem with that feeling?
yeah,
Because that's just okay. My kids want me to buy them sweets all the time,
yeah,
but I don't have to, and I don't have to feel bad about it. So
right,
we would be looking at, well, how does that create a pressure?
yeah,
And my guess, I'm interrupting, so please tell me
yeah.
if this is right. My guess is there's a pressure that I, quote, should be generous. And it's a tension because a bit of me doesn't want to do that, doesn't feel right. But a bit of me thinks I can't be stingy or mean.
I think
So
that's
I
it.
should be generous. I can't be mean. But maybe some deeper wisdom is still telling me, yeah, but it's not quite right, this situation.
Yeah, and it's not quite right on maybe a couple of levels that,
Uh-huh.
this person also has some financial goals that they want
Uh-huh.
to try and achieve,
Uh-huh.
and they're feeling like they wanna get on with that,
Mm.
but then there's the pressure from family or an expectation that now that they've got more money, that
Mm.
they should be more generous, and I think
Mhm.
that's exactly, you've hit the nail on the head. Without me having got into that, I reckon that that's very common tension for
Yeah.
people when they
Yeah.
come into money.
So the projection is something around my relationship to true generosity and also true stinginess or greediness. Now, before we dive into that, I want to acknowledge something because interestingly, this same thing came up on a workshop I ran last week. It's particularly common. So there are different scenarios. It could be that suddenly I win the lottery and I have loads more money than my family, and that creates the same sort of pattern. This is also particularly common where maybe I've come from a family and maybe a country and an upbringing where there was a lot less money. So maybe I've come from, yeah, a much poorer country, and maybe it's been a dream of my family that I would get educated and work and earn money. And and that's very common all over the world, really. It's the story of, it's kind of the American dream and the story of immigration, or at least until recently, the story of immigration.
Yeah.
But I want to honor that as a kind of an important part of many people's culture. So even when we're talking about how we might relate to that differently, we need to do that in a way that's true and genuine and healthy, but doesn't kind of dishonor that cultural expectation.
Yeah.
It would be different if I just suddenly won 20 million on the lottery. I might still have issues, but I don't still have that same cultural expectation.
Mm.
So that's important. Either way, though, we can work with the same energies.
Yeah, and there was that cultural
Was there?
dynamic, yeah,
Yeah,
definitely present.
yeah. So it's quite common. It's like I'm the first generation to make money, or maybe
Yeah.
even to be working in the West or to
Yeah.
have a certain lifestyle. So as well as the personal family relationship, there's a whole kind of cultural thing
Mm.
there, and that's really
Yeah,
important.
and then almost like an expectation, okay, well, now you should send money back home to the elders or to the
Yeah,
extended family and
yes,
things like that, because I guess you come from a culture where, and we've talked about this before, where families and tribes were a lot more interconnected and there was that mutual kind of looking after, and we've kind of lost that as,
that's right.
we've evolved in the Western world, I would say. But those cultural norms, so to speak, maybe are still alive and bubbling, and it's like, okay, well, you need to be
Yeah.
sending money here and there. I can imagine that being part of the scenario.
Yeah, and they're important, and as with all of this work, there's a grain of truth in all of it. So you should. The problem is, anytime I'm acting from a should rather than a free
Mm.
flow of money, I'm grabbed by something that's not helpful. So I think the step here we would explore with a person like this, and maybe then we'll do some other examples. It would not be appropriate to feel every time they want something, I must give them money because I feel pressured and because they would judge me. And because actually, that's not generous. However much I give or however much I pay for, it's not really generous because it's only coming from pressure, expectation, should. It's not really coming freely. So it's not, in my view, it's not true generosity. On the other hand, it's not appropriate just to say I'm going to take it all for myself and disconnect entirely from family needs. So the interesting thing would be, how would I find my right relationship to what and how much I hold on to and save and invest and spend,
Mm.
and what and how much I give? And what work do I need to do to free myself up? Because always with money, true freedom is when there can be a healthy, conscious flow. I can give
Yeah,
when it's right to give and it feels good to give and it's appropriate to give.
yeah,
And I can hold when it's right and appropriate to do that.
yeah. I'm almost feeling like that the term that we've used before, or I've sort of used like conscious budgeting, where your budget allows you to be both generous and stingy at the same time. You know,
Yes, I agree, except, and I see what you say, but there's a step before I can put those lines into my budget.
yeah,
But you're right. The one result, if I was truly free and had done the inner psychological work, then I may absolutely have each year a budget which is all the practical stuff I need in life, my stingy just for me
yeah,
ego bling budget,
yeah.
and my offering to my family budget. And I might do that. The work is done when I can look at both of those budget lines and feel both of them are good,
Mm,
and not feel resentment or a fear, or and if I could talk openly to someone, say, well, I've got this in this budget for this and this and this, and that I could keep reflecting on those and change it. Hopefully what's coming across when I say this is there's like a fluidity and a freedom
yeah,
in it. So in this case, the reclamation, in other words, the psychology, the projection I might need to reconnect with, and I don't know your client, so I'm making a general point, but it might be something like this. I am mean and stingy, and it's okay. And again, for new listeners, we always say below the labels, there's an energy that's appropriate. And we could maybe think, well, below the label of reclaiming I'm mean and stingy is the capacity that when I need to hold on, I hold on to my resources, or I don't give my resources just because there's a pressure and a fear of judgment that I should be generous. So I might need boundaries. I might need the capacity to consciously be mean and stingy, not because I'll never give ever anything, but because if I can do that, then when I give freely. And the other thing might be, well, there's probably another area, so let me pause there. But yeah, I think we're talking about generosity and stinginess. I think there's also another area we might need to go into. But how does this sound, Shaba?
yeah. And I think that's the aim of this work, is right to identify these areas, and then
Mm.
I always just see it as almost like you're just releasing the clutch that they
Yeah.
have around you, and doing that reclamation, listeners will know, is incredibly, well, you will experience something if it lands, because we want to be able to access both the generous and the stingy part of ourselves.
Yes. Yes. And the point is, they're both there. And other people see them, but we need to be able to see them and not judge them and feel free with them.
Do you just want to sort of complete there? So you did the reclamation, which
Yeah,
was I'm stingy and mean and it's
yeah.
okay. And then what would be
The opposite.
the opposite?
Yeah, well, it would be to realize that if I'm consciously stingy, or I don't just say yes because of pressure and expectation, it doesn't mean I'm not generous.
Mm,
So it would be I am generous with and without buying the family holiday every year. Let me give you an example of how this could work if we don't do this work. If we don't do this inner work, here's what happens. I pay for the holiday this year. Next year, I pay for the bloody holiday. The following year, I pay for the effing holiday. And it looks like I'm generous, but actually a buildup of resentment is happening. And then guess what? No one feels great about the holiday because there's a tension and we're not really enjoying it. So what looks as money generosity actually isn't generous,
yeah,
right? This is the paradox. On the other hand, if I don't do the work, I think I'm being generous, but I'm not really being generous because I'm resenting it and it doesn't feel good. Then the moment I need to, I learn that it's okay to say, dear family, I love you. Please let me know if you're truly in need, but I'm not going to pay for the holiday every year. First of all, I can see all the other ways I can be generous, because I might be generous with my time, attention, care, love, help, regardless of money. See, one of the problems is if I think my generosity is always tied up with money, now I have it, I start to not see, and everyone else starts to not see, all the other ways you can be generous in a family without money. And that's a
yeah,
shame, right? And then when I do want to, maybe something happens or a family member needs it, then the money can come and everybody knows it's freely given. So it's true generosity. So then I learned that being stingy and mean really is okay, because it's about boundaries and not always being pressured. And that I am and can continue to be generous, maybe, and loving with my family, with my money, and also with other things that aren't money. In that direction, I hope you can feel it. Generally, the whole thing is more healthy. I hope.
yeah. So Have you got another example that you wanted to bring, or are we going to look
But
at it
I
from the other side of the
think,
relationship?
yeah, I think maybe we do the other side next time, because I think there's other projections that are worth mentioning here.
Go for it.
So does this area of stinginess and meanness, does that resonate with most of what you're picking up from this person? I'm
Yeah,
wondering if there were other things that were troubling.
I don't know them that well because I've only met them once, and this came up, and so
Not, yeah.
I couldn't be 100% sure, but that's the sort of feeling I get. And even like talking within sort of family and community
Mm,
settings, you do pick up on
mm,
this sort of, especially within our culture, which has come from the East.
mm,
This family expectation is very, very heavy in
yeah.
most areas of life, let
Yeah.
alone when it comes to sort of money and giving.
Yeah, and it's traditional and
Yeah.
as it's important. So again, we're not saying we ignore it or disrespect it, but we still need to find our way of relating. It reminds me of something we've said in the podcast before, but it's worth repeating. What Jung, so a lot of the psychology we draw on in our conversations comes ultimately from Carl Jung. And he talked about our maturation as humans as individuation. And the key here is individuation is becoming our own self and who we truly and fully are, but still in relationship to others, family, society. So it's neither always being pressured and pulled by the expectations of our upbringing or the stories of our culture, because then we're just stuck, but nor is it heading off by ourselves and sort of cutting ties with our culture and our relationships and our family. So there's something in this where I can still understand my culture, respect it, be in relationship to, let's say, people back home in this case, and still feel free to make my own decisions. I want to, yeah, the other thing that often comes up around this. So let me give some examples. I did a money workshop with a group of very, very successful businessmen. They were all men. And I think the wealthiest of them all was a billionaire. He'd flown them all over on his private jet, not me. I took the train, but he flew them all over. And I didn't know them before. But one of the things he said and worked on was a feeling that his family didn't understand him. Now he was so successful, and of course that's about money and other things, probably the circle he moved in. He had a tremendous sense of simply not being understood by his family. And, there was some real sadness there. He kind of accepted it, but it was also sad. Someone else in the same group who was also very successful had come from a British working class background, very proud and quite happy, content, but proudly working class community, and now was a multi-millionaire. And he realized he also had no idea how to kind of talk about his money. He didn't want people to know about his money. Um, and for him, it was about belonging and connection. And we didn't have to work too deeply to find out that in different ways, being understood, belonging, connected, for both of these people, for them, there was a sense, and remember, we're talking about projection, that with considerable money, I mean, more money than anyone in their
Mm.
upbringing could have imagined, it created a feeling of no longer belonging or being understood or connected to what was important to them, their family and their roots. So I think very often that's a deeper emotion entanglement that can lie kind of underneath even these things about who pays for what holiday. So as
Mm.
well as in your client's example, well, I don't want them to think I'm mean and stingy. There's also, but I really want to still be part of this.
And they were genuinely experiencing a void in
Yeah,
relationships. So this wasn't them assuming that people are treating them
yeah,
differently, or
yeah.
this is lived out.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
again, it's often both. There's a
Mm.
reality with our money
Okay.
stories, and we're bringing something to it. So one thing I might say here is in this work, even though we could nod and understand, gosh, yes, I'm sure being a billionaire might make you disconnected or misunderstood, we also know that the number is never the quality. So it might be necessary for us to explore our own sense, regardless of our money, with and without money, with and without a billion, of the part of us that is misunderstood, all of us, and is a mystery to others and isn't misunderstood and is disconnected, and the part that is always connected and belongs with and without my millions.
In this situation is the sort of
Mm.
like the detective work around, because it's both sides of the coin, right?
Yes.
And so it
Yes.
is quite
That's what
complicated.
makes it tricky. Yeah.
It's very tricky because
Yeah.
there is definitely stuff being played out by both
There
sets of
is.
actors.
Yes.
Um,
Of course.
and it's just so funny because even when you narrate that, there is that voice inside of me which is just like, yeah, but he's a billionaire, like the narrative. And so when you were talking
Well,
about,
hang on, slow down. He's a billionaire, so
so
what?
what? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I caught myself.
What,
So
that he should have no problems or have loads of
yeah,
friends or
there
always
is
feel.
there is that little snap judgment reaction.
Yeah.
I'm quite getting quite attuned to catching
Yeah,
it in
great.
action,
Yeah.
and it's like, and then you've got to say, well, it doesn't matter whether he's got a billion, because people with a billion have, you know, real connection issues with their family, and people with no money have real
Well,
connection.
yeah, because they're all human,
They're all
you know?
human. It's
They're all
so
human.
interesting. It's so
Yeah,
interesting to
yeah.
catch yourself in the moment.
That was great because, of course, what you just did in court is very likely what someone on the other side of the equation is
That,
likely to do
that's
based
why
on their own projections.
that's why I
Yeah,
brought up the other side of the
yeah,
equation, because I can easily see being a family member
yeah,
being like, well, what's his like? Probably
yeah,
he's got loads of money.
yeah. I might feel jealous. I might feel inferior. I might feel many things in relation to their number.
Yeah.
And one of the things I do when I feel inferior or lacking, I'm very likely to imagine that the person on the other side of the money equation feels superior or has no problems or feels super happy the whole time.
Hmm.
So in relationship, we split, right? We're doing this within ourselves. Part of the work we're saying is I need to be in touch with my own capacity to be inferior and superior.
Yeah.
But in relationship, it often splits. So he's feeling disconnected and misunderstood and maybe not 100% happy about his money. And he was successful and happy in many ways, but this was a difficulty. But then he comes to a family gathering, and what he really wants is to meet people who will relate to him as a human and see through the numbers and go, hey, how are you? God, it must be pretty stressful having that much money. Or, God, I bet it's weird coming back and seeing all of us. You know, someone who will just relate to him simply as a human. That's probably what he wants. But if I'm with my projections about, oh, look at him with all his stuff and I'm rubbish and I'm inferior, I can't do it. I'm projecting like he's some sort of, I don't know, idealized superhero. And it's a load of nonsense.
Mm.
And therefore, we are creating the disconnection. The money isn't creating the disconnection. We are, in the words of Arnie Mindell, we're dreaming each other up.
Yeah.
And so we do a
Do,
disconnected
do you
dance.
remember that story I told right at the beginning of our podcast journey? I think it was in the first episode or two, where I had this real problem with people that had £1 million to
Yeah.
invest. And I suddenly felt like I couldn't be a competent advisor to someone who had that amount of wealth in my earlier days. It was really weird. I just couldn't figure it out. And someone could come in with, 999,000
And you're fine.
and I'd feel okay. Right. And it's
Yeah.
like suddenly, you know, a number gets in the way of the relationship and suddenly things change.
Well, again, yes, just to be pedantic,
Yeah.
your projection onto what unconsciously you make that number means,
Yes.
that's what gets in the
Yes.
way. I know you know that, but just for
Yeah,
listeners
no,
to make
good
that
to clarify.
distinction.
And so, yeah, I'm trying to think back to what that projection
Yes.
would have been like. It could be that they have a level of sophistication and a level of knowledge or
Yeah.
status
Yeah.
or whatever, but there was a superior and an
Yeah.
inferior kind of a
Yeah.
complex taking place.
Yeah.
And I suddenly felt, a little bit like,
Yeah.
bit different. Like I'm not free, open, like
No.
authentic,
Yeah.
connecting
Yeah.
Shabba.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like a little smaller,
Yeah. You become smaller. And it's
smaller.
so interesting. So we are actually talking about the other side now, which
Yeah.
is great. It's great to notice that if a client has 1 million, I suddenly assume or project onto them that they're superior and
Yeah.
sophisticated. I mean, maybe they won it all gambling, or maybe they inherited it all,
Yeah.
or maybe they're who knows what. It could be anything to get that money. But because I, in that moment, get caught with my projections, I don't see the humanity.
Yeah.
It's harder for me to see, we're all confused beings on our journey, and frankly, our numbers have
Yeah.
remarkably little to do with what's really going on. I don't see that. I might not see the ways in which they're suffering with and without their money.
Mm.
because I'm so much with my projection. And that's what creates disconnection and lack of belonging.
I feel like I hijacked it because we were talking about the person that had a lot of
Yeah.
money and not feeling like he could be in relation with other people. And I feel like there's a step or there's something that that person can do.
Yes.
And we didn't sort of quite get onto it
Okay.
because
Yeah. Well,
because I
but I
hijacked
think it
it.
was, well, I think it was very relevant what you did because you were looking at it from the other side. So you're right that there's two people involved, right? And therefore it can get tricky, but we can only work with our side of it. So let me take the side of the guys who had lots of money
Yeah.
first
Yeah.
and talk about the sorts of work they might do. And then we'll take the other side.
Mm.
Ideally, in a relationship or a family, both sides will do the work, but it's often not that way.
Yeah.
But what I have learned through this work in sometimes extraordinary and kind of mind blowing ways is when one person in a relationship does the work, often the other person changes, even if they had no idea the person's done the work. That's maybe a whole other podcast, actually. Okay. So with these two guys, there was something like this. Now I have all of this money. People don't understand me. I don't feel connected. I don't feel I belong. Another one is also about loyalty. That's slightly different. Like I'm worried I'm disloyal to my proud past. So the step is to, as I say, reclaim or integrate these both sides and realize it's not the money. So it might be to see that it's true. I'm misunderstood and I don't belong and it's okay. That's true for all of us. It's not about money. Isn't it true that you sometimes feel misunderstood? I sometimes often feel misunderstood. I often feel I don't belong. Now, the difference is if I can consciously get I don't belong or I am an outcast or I'm disconnected and it's okay, I can feel into the positive energy in there, which is something about really being my own person, not just being bound by the tribe or the culture, being free. And I can acknowledge that anyone who's a true individual will have to be at times misunderstood, not belong, and disconnected. Right. So I claim that energy consciously rather than think, oh, my money means no one understands me
Mm.
and that's bad. And the other side I do, which for these guys is even more important, is I say, I am part of this family, or I am in the right place, or I am connected with and without my millions. Because my family is my family. It's not about my numbers or even their weird shit that they do with my numbers. It's about our blood or our community or our shared
Yeah.
history. And often it's my stuff about numbers that's partly getting in the way. And then
Yeah.
I can maybe take a step how that would actually work.
And this is just such a delicate one because it's not about I'm spending too much and the reasons why I'm spending
I
too
just
much.
got the money. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm just wondering how then that causes that person to show up
Right.
differently in the family, because
Yes.
that's what it is really. It's like there's almost an awkwardness
Yeah.
around the
Yes.
relationship because of the money and what the projection
But
is.
well, because of the projection. But
Yeah.
here's the thing, it's like cart before the horse.
Mm.
Before I do this work, unconsciously, I think because of my money, I'm disconnected.
Mm.
After I do the work, I realize two things. One is I'm disconnected and I don't belong, and that's fine. And I am deeply connected. I'm in the right place with and without my money. And then I see it doesn't need to be that my money disconnects. I'm
Mm.
connected with these people. So I see it's me that's doing it. Then, of course, there might be weird stuff and they might have, but one thing I could do is if I'm connected with someone, I might talk about that.
Yeah.
I might go, hey, you know what? I spend my whole life flying around with billionaires and it's great. And I want to say two things about that. One is you guys never asked me about my life. I'd love you to because I'm still me, right? The other thing is I want you to know that it can be a right old pain in the ass. And what I'd really love is us just to, whatever, go down to this old bar or have a drink or whatever. So I don't know what they'd say, but the possibility of realizing I am part of this community. I just
Mm.
happen to have different zeros in my bank account. What's connecting is not the size of our bank accounts, it's whether I can connect
Mm.
and say, you know what? I feel sometimes a bit shit coming back here because there's something about money that gets in the way and I don't want it to get in the way. And I'd love us to be able to chat like we used to. it's probably really weird for you that I've got all this money. And I could talk in a really messy way, but it could still feel more connecting.
Mm.
Does it make
Yeah,
sense?
absolutely. I'd love to see that play out and see what happens.
Well, maybe with this person you might be working with.
Yeah.
And it's not easy, but
Mm.
the reason it's not easy is not because of our money, it's because any time I refuse to uphold a projection, my own or anyone else's, it feels a bit weird. But the
Yeah.
key is I see I'm always connected. I will
Yeah.
never not be part of this family, but I've been acting like it because of money and because of the weirdness. I'm just going to stop doing that. I'm connected with my
Yeah.
billions, without my billions.
Yeah.
And then I talk about whatever I talk about.
With a few minutes that we've got left, should we just quick
Mm.
tackle the side?
I think we should do that in another episode. I think it's
Okay.
worthy. I think this question of how do we handle people with lots of
Okay.
money, I think that's a whole episode. Maybe we do that next.
Next sounds like a good place to.
But what we've
Yeah.
what we've talked about more is the people who somehow end up with more money than they're used to or their family or their upbringing is used to. And the step is, despite appearances and despite other people's weirdness, you're still part of the community and you're still connected. You don't need to let the money get in the way, and you don't need to let other people's weirdness get in the way. You could even reclaim, I am connected and belong with and
Mm,
without other people's weird money stuff.
yeah. Seems very appropriate for this kind of situation.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And not to forget also the one earlier about I am stingy and mean and it's okay, and I'm generous with and without my money. So I hope that's helpful for some people listening in that situation, but also those who aren't in that situation. I think it gives us a step towards how we might relate to others with money.
I think next week we complete that and give people who are on the other side.
Yeah, which is more. I think that's
I
more
would say
people.
so, yeah, and brings up a lot of things as we saw just in my little interaction.
Yeah.
Tim, I'll see you next time.
All right. Thanks, Sheba. See you soon.